Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sadia Asad and I welcome you in my science class. Today I will be teaching you about variation and inheritance. So basically first we will be studying about the history of variation, and then about the types of variation, then adaptation and the recent advancement in the field, and then the question answer session. So before discussing the history, I would like to show you a picture of the students or individuals, and you're supposed to find out the differences among those individuals. So based on your responses, I assume that the responses are about their different skin tone, their different hair texture, their different eye color. So by looking at these individuals, you pinpointed that these individuals are different from each other, although that they belong to the same category, that they are humans, but they still have those differences. So basically we call those differences variation in biology. So how the variation is discovered, and what is the history behind this? Let's discuss it. So first there was a scientist, Charles Darwin, and he worked in the mid 19th century, and through his work and according to his theory, he stated that the individual within a species vary in their traits, right? Which means that that individual with different traits are having variation. So those traits which we call characteristic, uh, someone having advantageous trait will help those individual to survive and reproduce further in the future. So based on his work, he stated his theory in the famous book of the origin of species. He stated that individual with those advanced or advantageous trait have more chances of survival in the future, and the nature selects such individual for further growth and reproduction, and he called this theory as the theory of natural selection. Then as we have discussed about the natural selection, this is one of the very famous example from Darwin's work, in which he stated that there were a group of giraffes, and the variation was about in their neck size. So those who were having a short neck, they were not able to reach to the food which are on the upper branches of the trees, and those giraffes which were having long neck, they were able to reach to the long branches, and they later on reproduce and survive better, which he also called the survival of fittest. Then some more work were done in genetics by a very famous scientist, Mendel, who worked on a pea plant, and he worked on the 7 characteristics of the pea plant. He selected 7 traits of these pea plant, and he studied the inheritance of those traits later on, which laid the foundation of inheritance. And till that time, nobody know about the concept of genes. So Mendel further worked on the principle of inheritance, and they are the fundamental concept in biology, which laid the foundation of modern genetics, which we study today. Then there were some limitation, obviously, in the work of these scientists. For example, we talk about Darwin. So although Darwin recognized the importance of variation, and most of his work was based on the natural selection, in which he emphasized the method of adaptation. Like he said that the better adapted individual, the individual with the better traits adapt better in the environment. but he lacked the basic understanding of the genetics or the inheritance because due to the limitation of the scientific work and research techniques, etc. And obviously he lacked the knowledge of the genetic techniques which are more in practice in today's world. And if we talk about the Mendel work, so he generalized the idea of inheritance to the whole wide organism, which is not true because there are some other factors involved in genetics as well, like mutation or genetic recombination. So he did not discuss or discover those aspects of the genetics. And if we talk about his p experiment, which is a very fundamental experiment in the field of genetics and inheritance, it has a limitation of the sample size of the pea, and then he studied very limited varieties or traits of the pea plant. So these were the limitation of these two scientists. Now, talking about variation, which is our topic for today. So variation by definition is the differences shown by the individual of one kind of organism. These differences can be, the type of which we just studied in the previous slide, that they could be phenotypy that which we can see through the eye. For example, the hair color, the eye color, the skin tone, and these differences could be genotypic as well, which are present on the genetic level, which we cannot see with our naked eyes, but with the different genetic techniques, which we can identify that yes, there are genetic differences as well. So we have two type of variation. The first one, as we discussed earlier, is a genetic variation, which is most of the cases caused by mutation of the genes, and they are inheritable. They passed on to the next generation from parents to offspring, right? Or we also call it genetic recombination as well. So this means that if parents are having some trait, for example, if parents are having brown hair color, so it is very much possible that their offspring might acquire or inherit the brown hair color. That's why siblings or individual resemble with their parents. And the second type is the environmental variation, which means that environment causes these variation, and they are not inherited. For example, if someone is having any scar through any accident, or having any tattoo made on the body, so it is something which person has acquired or from the environment. It is not inherited. And while discussing with the Darwin's theory earlier, we discussed that those individuals which adapt the advantageous trait, which help those individuals to survive better in some harsh environment. We call that particular organism has adapted to this particular harsh environment. So adaptation is a very important concept in biology. So adaptation is basically physical or behavioral characteristic or features of an individual that help that organism to adapt better in a certain environment, which means that different organisms adapt differently according to their environment. We will understand this concept better with the example. So in the upcoming slide, there are examples of adaptation in which we can see that, we have camel. So those individuals or organisms which survive in a very harsh climate, they have such features which help them adapt better in such hot climate. For example, camel have long eyelashes, which help them to protect from the sand dunes, which otherwise might come in their eyes. And then they have padded feet, which help them to walk easily in the sand. Then they have nostrils designed in such a way which help them again to protect from the sand. And then they have lump for the storage of food and for the storage of water in such harsh condition. And on the other hand, we have an example from the plant cactus. So as we know that cactus survive in a very harsh climate, so cactus has very thick stem or leaves which store water for the long period of time, and they have a waxy cuticle or layer on their upper side which help prevent the evaporation of water as there is a low rainfall in the desert, and their roots are again very widespread and they are very on the upper side of the ground, so they can easily absorb the water. So by looking at these examples, it is evident that such organisms have those adaptive features or advantageous traits which help them survive better in such conditions. So before forwarding, I assume that there would be some anticipated questions from the students, and let's have a look at those questions. So the first question is that can variation lead to the formation of new species over time? So yes, variation is a gradual process which happen over the period of time by adaptation. And answer to the first question is that this phenomena is called speciation, in which individual adapt according to the environment, and a different new species has produced, and we call this fundamental process as speciation. And the second question is, are variation only limited to physical traits, or can they also include behavior and abilities? So yes, variation is physical as well as behavioral capability also. Like there are through variation, an individual is capable to adapt to a different behavior based on the circumstances and on the environment. So it is both physical and behavior depending on the situation. And the last question is, are there any ethical consideration related to studying and understanding variations? So yes, we should keep in mind that if some research group is working on variation of an organism or a species, or if they are collecting data from a group of human beings, and it involves confidentiality. So yes, ethics suggests us and teaches us that we should keep all those data in a confidential way, and we should work in a very professional way, keep ethics in mind. So now as we are talking about variation and adaptation, we have started with the history. We discussed the development of variation over the period of time, and then the basic concept of variation, its type, and then adaptation. And now looking at the recent advancement in the field of variation and inheritance. So it is modern synthesis and molecular biology. So molecular biology is the most recent or advanced form of, we can say, the variation and adaptation. And as we have discussed, the work of Darwin in 19th century, and then the Gregor Mendel in the late 19th century. Now in the early 20th century, the work of Darwin, theory of evolution, was merged in the field of genetics. It was categorized in the field of genetics, and it laid the foundation of modern synthesis. And then in the later 20th century, further advancement in the molecular biology was made by the discovery of DNA, and then the with the development of techniques such as DNA sequencing, molecular genetics, recombinant DNA technologies. So all these molecular data laid the foundation of modern molecular biology, in which we can study the variation on a molecular level, on the genetic level, on the DNA level, and what practical usage of these information can provide us in our a practical life are involved in by the development of such advanced techniques. So as we have discussed variation and adaptation. So coming back to the big questions, that what big questions are related with such concept. Um, and let's have a look at this big question, like how do Islamic technique guide the use of genetic technologies such as gene editing or genetic screening? What are the considerations regarding the manipulation or alteration of genetic variation within an Islamic perspective? So this question has two parts. In the first part, they are asking about the Islamic guideline about the modern technologies of molecular biology, which involve gene editing or genetic screening, and in the second part, which is linked with the scientific domain, that for what purposes we do genetic editing or genetic screening. So let me explain the scientific part first. Like as we have discussed the development in the field of variation and inheritance, and we came to the conclusion that with the advancement in the molecular biology, there are very advanced techniques developed, which help us, in our practical life, to address multiple problems related with genetic diseases. For what we do gene editing or genetic manipulation by techniques involving CRISPR, in which in which we can delete the specific gene which is involved for the mutation or for the disease of any genetic disease which might harm that individual. So by applying such technique, we can save, or we can, try to help such individuals which might otherwise suffer in their life. And these techniques are also used in agriculture field, for example, to increase the yield of certain crops. And these genetic screening or gene editing is also used in the field of research purposes to bring solutions to the big problems. So this is the role of science related to the gene editing or genetic screening. The other part, which is concerned with the Islamic ethics. So as we all know that Islam also um, stress us to respect for the sanctity of life. So when Islam is also stressing on the sanctity of life, we should keep these ethical teaching of Islam, that when something is done for the, yeah, for the benefit of life, for the benefit of human being, Islam also allows us to, take such steps. But for the further research, or for the further Islamic guideline, you can research this question on your own, or you can, ask this question from your Islamic scholar. And I am giving you as a homework the second big question, which I would like to have your opinion, your thought, your research. That how would you address, or how would you, what are your thoughts on the second big question? So this is kind of your homework. Please go do your homework and come up with your answers. So the second question is that how do we address the ethical concerns related to potential genetic discrimination based on variation? For example, the genetic predisposition to certain diseases or conditions in areas such as employment, insurance, or social context. So you can see that this question has, let me help you in dissecting this question, that this question has ethical concern, right? In perspective of discrimination based on the genetic diseases, and the social context as well. For example, employment and the other social context, and the third, the scientific perspective as well, which involves the genetic diseases or some genetic conditions. So it has three aspects to cover. I would like to hear your opinion on this. With this, I would like to finish my lesson, and if there are any questions or anything which you did not understand, please get back to me. Thank you so much.